initiative that we started about 5 years ago, and kind of how this has transitioned, but we really want to focus mostly, even from the beginning, on what we're doing now to help manage our one-to-one project. Brian Tolbeck, our Chief Technology Officer, will be co-presenting. I'm manage basically all the technology, both for the technology and instructional materials. We brought those under one umbrella. And then Anna Maxim, who we use right now, the Hayes TipWeb product to manage all of our assets, and in particular our one-to-one, as the Chief Operating Officer and sitting in the back. And I didn't know that Matt was going to be with us today, but he is the CEO for Hayes, so if you all have questions about managing one-to-one assets, they will be here to help answer some questions. Real briefly, just to kind of give you a quick look at where we're at, and I'm going to turn it over to Brian. We are a suburban community of Dallas-Fort Worth, 52,000, a little above students, 6,000 employees. And as you can see, over 127 square miles, 69 schools. Geographically, we're very spread out. The schools very widely spread across the area. And now we're going to kind of go right into where we're at.
Thanks, Ken. So a little bit about our environment. We have a program called 1 to X. And the X, if you haven't heard of this program before, the X is basically the variable of trying to put the right device in front of kids. So we have a lot of technology. As you can see here, we have on our Windows, Apple, iOS, Chromebooks, over 91,000 computers, either tablets, laptops, desktops, that we're managing. And we're only one-to-one in grades 4 through 12. So we have a lot of technology out there in carts, in class sets, and labs yet, especially in our career centers. And the structure for our department, you'll notice, I just want to point one thing out. Our digital learning team is through our learning and teaching division. We're not a member of the technology division. So really, this should probably have a digital learning really overlaid. But we have really 4 divisional teams within technology. We have information services. They handle all the applications, enterprise and instructional, all of our integrations, teams, records. That whole group fits in that team. We're very, very centralized. And I know in some districts might have people that kind of serve a technology role working in a functional department, maybe your finance department or your student services department. All those folks live in the technology department in our area, and then they serve the functional teams. Then we have our technical services group. They manage basically the stuff. Our MDM, our devices, the field techs out on the campuses, and a centralized desktop and help desk team. We have our network, infrastructure, and cybersecurity group. They oversee, obviously, all of those items, phone systems, network, storage, disaster recovery, all of that. And then we have our technology warehouses and instructional material warehouses. So that's kind of the structure. So one thing before we get into this, what we wanted to touch on is one of the challenges for us is we don't collect devices. So when a student or a staff member, for that matter, is issued a device, we don't collect it. So we're going to tell you, this is really not so much about a cookbook or recipe book of how are we onboarding, how are we leveraging the MDM. This is more about accountability and tracking, and a little bit about our story of how did we re-up our program. So as Ken said, this really got started about 2011, 2012, and it was actually kind of a hot button topic in our school district. We actually had a couple folks run for the school board, really not seeing where the district should be investing in technology. So we knew that as that technology was starting to age out, we really had to have some strong data to say we were good stewards of that technology, that it was used, and that it was accounted for. And one of the challenges with that, obviously, is when you're not collecting the devices, those processes of inventory and controls aren't there. So what we had to do is develop specific processes to really track this stuff down. And why we don't collect is we're trying to create a culture of using the technology really from day one. So when school starts, the resources are provisioned, it's integrated off our SIS system, they have the device, they're ready. It takes us a long time even to collect our senior iPads. That's a couple-week process to do one grade level. So we don't feel like we have the manpower to be collecting and redistributing. So this keeps the technology in the hands of the kids. The logistics are in there. It would really devalue the technology if they didn't have it right away for the start of school. And also we want to increase the kids' technical skills. The more they're using it, even through the summer, we have students that use technology through summer school and keep that sense of ownership. So when the program started, the focus of it was really going fast and furious. How do we get this rolled out? We're trying to get devices in the hands of kids. And we were doing that, but we really didn't have good processes in place. And some of the process pieces are, we have a self-insurance program. We call it a replacement benefit program. So each year there's a $40 program, or a $40 fee. That fee gets collected. We manage that through Skyward. And then students that are free reduced, they're backed off to $30, and then campuses have the ability to scholarship financial hardships. So if you look at that, there's a lot of logistics and sequencing of when that happens. Are the parents formed saying, hey, we want our kids to have a device? Is that current? Are the kids' devices showing up? All of that stuff we had to nail down. In that program, when it was kicked off, they also, I thought we were very generous. Students could have one lost or stolen device, 2 breaks within a year. So we were really tracking, is that fund covering that? And I think it was fall of 2015 is when I started in the district, and I started looking at that, I started looking at our numbers, and like, why this isn't tracking right? The revenue doesn't keep up with the expenditures, what's going on here? So I quickly realized we've done a great job getting devices out here, but we haven't really wrangled this in to know that we're really reconciling all of these different data points. So that's really what we're going to focus on. The other part too is we had a student parent handbook that defined a lot of that stuff. It defined, here's how it would work, here's how many claims you have. What it never did is it instructed the campuses how to administer it. So we were very, very site-based. Campuses had a lot of leeway, and there was work that needed to be done. And we were also doing, at that time, compliance checks, where we were calling every kid down, looking at the iPad, looking for a break, was it jailbroken? Just super, super disruptive. So what we wanted to do is, how do we actually go talk to kids where there's an issue when we know there's an issue, and leave everybody else alone? So what we ended up doing is we had to identify what defines a student-related issue. We had to progress monitor those issues. We had to develop clearly defined processes for our technicians and our campus people that administer the program to follow. We had to get people trained. So the systems we use for that, Ken already mentioned TipWeb. TipWeb is our inventory system. And at that time too, we had just transitioned from Magic, which we were using for inventory, bringing all of our assets into TipWeb. So that data had some work that needed to be done on it. We also, for Skyward, we use Skyward, so in our online form process, as parents complete that, they're opting in or opting out of that program for having a one-to-one device. Okay, so forms are supposed to be done by a certain date, we check that. And then our MDM, at the time we were using LandGrab, we're now using Jamf, but that played into our management of this to kind of change behavior, which I'll get into in a minute. So what we needed to do is identify students with issues. We had a lot of data. We had data in Skyward, we had data in MDM, and we had data in TipWeb. So what we wanted to do is leverage that data, and essentially we wanted the users to play an active role in making sure this stuff is current. So what we came up with is what we call a UIVP, User Initiated Validation Process. Okay? And I'll explain what that is. The concept is we're basically, I'll just show you. We ended up, we do have a development team on our information services team. What we ended up doing is we basically pushed out a web clip to every iPad. And then that web clip asks for an Active Directory username and password. They hit submit. Once it's submitted, it actually grabs a serial number off the device, matches up the Active Directory username and password, and it writes it back to another SQL database. Then what we do is we run queries off of that database to match it up, that the record jives with what's in our inventory system, to say that, hey, that's the kid that our records say should have the device, and they just log in as that user. So we don't want to talk to them. If there's an inventory issue. So what we ended up doing was we used our MDM to manage the behavior if there was a mismatch. Okay, so I'll show that. So this is we push out that web clip, they log in. Sorry about the colors on this. It's off a little bit, but the student and staff, we do this for staff as well. They log in, they hit submit, like I said, it gets written. What we're checking is the active directory number, serial number. We compare that, and if something's off, we use the MDM to change the behavior of the device to the point that the user has to take an active role and say, hey, I really don't like what you just did to me. Can we get this fixed? Okay? So here's how we did it. What we ended up doing is we query that database and we look at it and we set basically scripts that run off of it to change the background screen. Okay? So for example, this is what we get our warning screen, really just trying to show the color. We have text in there that's in English, Spanish, and Chin. So when their background screen changes, they can read like, oh, what's going on here? It means that they either didn't do the UIVP process, they didn't pay their fees, or the parents didn't sign up or opt into the program, like we're not in compliance with our paperwork. Which is actually a big deal, because when you're doing the insurance program, when it gets broke, we're kind of getting this going, we were having this going, that's why I never opted in. So we had to stop that. So this is basically a 10-day warning system. And we send that out through school messenger to all the campuses, or all the kids in grades 4 through 12, or we have our one-to-one. It also goes to staff saying, hey, we're rolling, now this is a culture at this point. We started doing this in, I guess the spring, or I guess it was spring of 2016. But they know this is coming, you got so many days to get it right. If they don't take an active role in fixing it, then we actually go into a red screen and we leverage the MDM to put restrictions in place. Okay? So basically we query that database table. If there's a mismatch, the MDM picks it up, applies a script, changes the screen to red. So now it's a visual cue. Both of those are really visual cues for teachers. So if a kid's in the iPad or in the classroom, oh, you're yellow, what's going on? What are you missing? Well, let me look. Or if it's red, they know the kid didn't take care of their responsibility within a 10-day period, and it changes it. Once the user takes an active role in correcting that, and it checks every time the iPad checks back into the MDM, the status change, these graphics go away and they get the LISD background again and they're back in compliance. So the other part to this is we needed to develop, this was a cool process, but then how do you monitor it? How do you progress monitor that you're making an impact? So what we ended up doing is we ended up really looking at, I already mentioned the data, we looked at the Skyward online forms, our fee management, we use fee management in Skyward, our MDM check-in and our tip web, and we grouped the issues by type. And basically what we did is we built out a logic table. So this logic table, if you can kind of follow the thinking, here's a kid or parent that opted in, they paid the fee, the device is checking in with the MDM, saying like it's being used, and the inventory records match based upon that query. So if they're ones across the board, we're good. We don't need to talk to you. If there's zeros across the board, it means they didn't opt in, they didn't pay the fee, our MDM does not show them logging in as an MDM user, and the inventory shows they don't have a device. They're good, they're doing BYOD. Any combination in between ends up kicking out a file that goes to the campus every night. So every night at the camp, or every morning, they can log into this web interface, which I'll show you in a second. They can pick their campus, and there's different types. It could be a fee issue, it could be an all issue, it could be a form issue. They can pick their report, they look at the report and find, okay, which kids are out of compliance. So I talk about this quite a bit departmentally. What gets measured gets done. Once we implemented this, and especially like our assistant chiefs of school that do the evaluations on principals, our superintendent was very, very supportive as well, recognizing, hey, we gotta make sure we're highly accountable for all this stuff. Everybody step up and play your role in this. This isn't just a technology department issue, this is a district issue. We wanna make sure we're being good stewards of the resources we purchased. And we track those, so every meeting, we look at it and say, what are total issues, where are the issue types, our field technicians and supervisors that manage that zone. They monitor it, and we just keep working those numbers until we have it right. And then, I already mentioned the repair structure. The repair structure is closely tied to the records. So we now, since we've rolled out, we're in the problem, we just did a major rollout. We ended up, since the start of school, we've deployed almost 26,000 new iPads, and I think we repurposed like iPad Airs into middle school and class sets right around 21,000. So we've handled almost all of our devices since the start of school. We just finished the project November 16th. But when we rolled that out, when I said before I thought we were very generous in the break option, our board felt so too. So that they charged us to do is come up with another way to do that. So what we ended up doing is we came up with a copay strategy. So the devices that we're rolling out is an iPad Pro with a smart keyboard. Okay, so the keyboard within our self-insurance program can be lost or stolen. You get one of them. On the second one, it's a $50 copay. On the third one, it's a full whatever we're paying price. So we got to track that. So all these have asset tags. The asset tag on here matches the asset tag on the device. Because what happens in the classroom, all the kids throw these down, and then how do you match up? Okay, let me just look like it's a visual cue for them. It's not ideal, but that's how we're doing it. And then we changed the break period where you get one lost, stolen, one break, and then the second one there's a copay, third one is full out pocket. So tracking the breakage is very important. Also on the 26,000 iPads that we purchased, many of those ended up with Apple Care. So in the way that was negotiated, we had 2 breaks over a 3-year period. So we got to really keep tabs on how many breaks do we have out there, how many remain, and then we are finding that we can, this is actually a picture, we have a student repair center. We started that, I think, 2 years ago. And we have students from our high schools that are in our career and tech ed track. They actually are paid employees. We have an AM shift and a PM shift, and they're doing the repairs. So when we can source the parts, we're actually able to fix those for less money than if we were going to outsource it. But we're so large, we can't do all the repairs. So some of it we do outsource, but when we look at the actual cost per repair, the students actually can do that a little bit less, or for less. So we got to really track Apple Care, so that after the second break it's sent to Apple, that we can manage the cost and control the costs and budget.
Just on that Apple Care thing, we've reached out to Apple to see if they can help us do this, because what happens is Apple iPads are considered disposable. So if we send in an iPad, I don't care what it's for, we're going to get a brand new one back. They just dispose of that. And what happens is that warranty now transfers to the new serial number. And so we said, okay, so how do we track this? Because now this iPad I just got back only has 1 break. Apple doesn't have a mechanism to track that. And so the problem we ran into was, so how do I know when a break happens, is it still have 2 breaks, 1 break, or no breaks? Because if it's no breaks, we send it to our student repair center, because Apple would charge us a fortune to get these things fixed. And so we wound up doing this in TipWeb, in creating a field in there. So we actually, at the beginning of the year, we put 2 free breaks. That's what every device went in with. And then when a break comes in, or repair comes in, we actually then translate that record into the record for the new serial number, and we mark that down to 1. And the next time it's 0. That would be 3 different serial numbers by the time we get to 0 breaks. But the only way you can do that effectively is to somehow track that. And Apple couldn't help us, so we had to come up with a method that would do it. If you get into this situation, there's going to need to be a mechanism to be able to handle that.
So you got an entirely different asset ID that's
Correct.
That's a kind of just a tracking ID that you're changing that serial number out.
Correct. Yep.
Did you say your asset tags are the same on your keyboards and the other device?
Yes.
Well, except for there's a K on the end of the one of the serial number for the keyboard. Yes, we actually had those special printed just for this. The keyboards are $127 a piece, so we track those as a separate item.
So the other piece we did is we developed what we call a 1-to-X campus playbook. And that campus playbook is like every single issue that comes up is documented on how campuses should carry that out. And what was happening before, I said it was very site-based. A campus might say, well, we'll give you a couple, 3, 4 more weeks to pay your insurance, or we'll don't worry about it. If you pay the insurance, then we'll get it fixed. So what we try to do is really centralize our procedures. So we train folks on that, and we actually built that out into Google Sites, and that has helped a lot. And we developed that playbook with our campuses. So our superintendent asked every campus to designate an administrator, especially when you're dealing with fees with parents. We wanted that person to interface with families. That administrator is called the iPad administrator. So it might be somebody that would have handled textbooks, or some campuses, the main principal wants that responsibility, but they just pick who that is. And we brought in basically cohorts of principals across our 69 campuses, and we co-developed this to say, is this gonna work for you? And once it was developed, then we brought it back to our leadership team to make sure we were good with it, because it's very public facing. You know, the community is gonna have to be responsible for the fees, the board's gonna get the phone calls, so we had to create some consensus building around it. But that really helped us standardize operating procedures for this particular program. So here's the results, and this is pretty incredible. So what we ended up doing is we greatly decreased the number of devices unaccounted for. So once we implemented that in the spring of 2016, and as I said, what measure gets done, we keep tracking those numbers. By the time school was out, we ended up with under 1% of the one-to-one devices that we felt legitimately we weren't sure where they were. Kids said they didn't have them, we couldn't hunt them down. Out of the 52,000+ devices, we had 0.5% of devices that we felt we didn't know where they were. And when they showed up as not knowing where they were, we had a process in place in the handbook saying, and that's on you. So those actually got built back out.
So what do you think your total overhead is? In terms of FTEs?
Well, I can tell you, departmentally, we have 115 people in our IT department.
Okay.
And that took a long time to develop this process. That said, now that is the process, it's very efficient. The reports run automated, they run every night, the campuses know what to look for. And I'm going to show you towards the end, we built out another application that shows the campuses kind of visually what their issues are. But quite honestly, in our situation, we had so many devices out there that without very good processing, we had to do something to bring this together. And we also knew we had to take this in front of the community and say, hey, we have this one-to-one initiative. We had great community involvement in developing a technology plan. The community was saying, we want you to continue to invest in technology. So we had to bring this to our facility group and say, hey, we have the devices, here's the data that supports it. So inventory, Ken's going to talk about inventory management.
Okay, so I heard on the last with 115 people, and just realize that in this, that 115 people is not all doing inventory management. A lot of it is develop those processes as we're going through that. But when you do a one-to-one with as many devices that are out there, 91,000+ devices, you know, almost 40,000 of those in a one-to-one capacity, and you got to touch each one of those. And many of you probably already know this. That's a monumental task, and finding ways to effectively do that has been the challenge. When we first started, we had Magic. Any of you use Magic, you know there's not an effective way to do a one-to-one. There's not a GUI where you can scan barcodes and inventory things and so forth. It is really almost more of a capital asset type tracking system if you were to do something along those lines. So when we first started doing a one-to-one, the district tried to use Destiny and to put the products in Destiny and then assign them like they would a textbook. The problem came in is that because we didn't collect those at the end of the school year, Destiny basically puts everything in kind of a lost mode, and then you have the issue of trying to get those back. It was just kind of a disaster, and we learned that as we went through it. So one of the things we really determined we needed to do is we had to find an asset management system that would allow us to track all the devices. Yes?
I'm sorry to interrupt. Your technology asset management, is that separate from your like your more fixed assets like furniture and stuff as well?
Yes, it would be separate. However, anything you can tag, you can track in TIPWare. If you can tag it with a tag, and we do a lot of things beyond technology in there, but that's its defined purpose. In fact, TipWeb builds two products, the TipWeb IM for instructional material, and this is called TipWeb IT for instructional technology as you go through that. So we began to go out and evaluate systems, and we basically settled on TipWeb, and in particular because of the way that it handled our 1-to-X. And we kind of analyzed the thing that we were looking at, and we really kind of felt like the three key areas we had to do was to lock in our receiving processes, because the amount of material we were receiving in was such a high number, it had grown so rapidly, and making sure we had a good grip of what came in and got that into TipWeb. The asset management tool being intuitive and fast and quick when you get into a one-to-one environment, and then audits. And those are the areas I'm going to kind of focus on, the last two in particular. So, and I apologize for these screens, the colors didn't come in, but what this is showing you is this screen right here. It's showing you what it takes to issue a device to a student. So what comes in, the student comes in, you basically pick the student's name out of the system that will be on that campus. You would actually scan in the barcode of the device and you hit enter. In TipWeb, that device is now assigned to that student. With our new products, I would do that for the device, and I do that for the keyboard. To collect that back from the student at some point, then I would go in, pick up the campus, I would scan the tag, it would automatically pull up the device, and then I would tell it what room to put it in, and what status I wanted it in. I'd hit enter, and then it would take it away from the student. And this line right here, if you can see it, is actually a student's name, and it would show you, I can pull up any student, and it's going to show me every device they have. And then I can just hit a button right there, and I can drill down on that device and look and see what's there. But when I've got a line of hundreds of students, if I just got to do 2 clicks for each student, and they're going through the line and get issued, this became a key decision point for us as we go through that. The other one was, as a student moved campus to campus, as they graduated or moved up the next level, we didn't have to do anything. The system automatically moves them and their device to the next campus. So,
can I ask a clarifying question?
Absolutely.
So does TipWeb IT integrate with your SIS and update from there? How is it updating automatically as they move campus to campus? Okay,
so we have an import every night from our student information system into TipWeb.
Okay.
So as we bring in that import, if that's like at the beginning of the year, we go through, we do the promotion of all the students to whatever grade they're in. If they change campuses, we bring that import that night, it looks at those, it automatically will then move that student in TipWeb because Skyward gave them that, and the device automatically follows it.
Thank you.
Okay, so then the next big challenge for us, and this was probably the biggest saving grace for us, was the audit functions as we go through here. We do an audit every year. We audit, when you go through here, you pick what devices you're going to audit. You go through and you might say, I'm going to do iPads, I'm going to do Apple laptops, I'm going to do, and every device type you listed, we do smart boards, we do projectors, we do document cameras, we do whatever. Then it will basically build out those audits for every campus across the district, and we'll show you in a minute what that does. But that now gives you the ability to have an accurate accounting of where we're at. The first year we did this, we had literally thousands and thousands of devices that we couldn't account for. Part of that was because of the integration from Magic into TipWeb. There were thousands of devices that were really no longer active. But in Magic, it wasn't easy to get rid of that. So we had to find a way to weed those out as we go through here. The one-to-one, we did one-to-one manually for a long time. Then we went to UVIP, which was described a minute ago, which allows you to, that's for both students and staff. So what we're doing now is we're doing everything in a classroom. Anything that's not assigned to an individual, and we're scanning the barcode on each one of them. And I think y'all all saw, and many of you may already have these, but the barcodes just look like this, so it's an easy item. But for those of you who might have an iPad who has, the back is all black, we actually have a web clip that comes up on here that prints out the barcode for the serial number in the device, so you can scan it off the screen, which is a problem we had our first couple of years.
scans into the
It's
tip
scanned.
web also?
It would scan in the tip web and it would validate, at that point, it would validate that this device was accounted for in tip web, and it would tell you who it belonged to as you go through and do that.
So the benefit, what Ken is saying, that let's say you're using a case that doesn't have a clear back, or it's hard to get to the asset tag, you just pull up that little web scan and you got your inventory.
Since our first year, we were taking cases off of all the iPads, and then this was developed after we went through that process. And then just some of the benefits of following an audit is, being able to provide the data back to folks. What we now have and what you'll see here in a minute is, better than 99% accuracy. Okay, so this report right here, this is the detailed report that you would see out of an audit. So this is from one of our high schools, and this is just a short shot, but I picked this one because you have some categories in here. This field here says in this particular room, there were 320 items audited. This column says verified, this says found, this says missing, and this says misplaced, okay? And those all sound great. Verified, that's an easy one to understand. And missing, okay, you can understand that to some extent. The two that are interesting, misplaced means that you found it, but it wasn't where it was supposed to be. The found is the key feature in TipWeb. You can scan a device. What it would show in my area here, if I was missing a device, like you'll see two missing in that same line, that means that when I did my campus, I didn't scan them. If those devices are scanned anywhere in our district, it would change that one of those twos to a found. And not only would it tell me it was found, it's going to tell me what campus and what room it was found in. So now I truly can go back and reconcile my audits and know where my equipment's at.
Question, going back to your self-insured program. So where are you at? You underwater or underwater?
We're in the black.
In the black on there?
Yep. We weren't in the black the last couple of years, but the devices were 4 or 5 years old, some were 6 years old. And the costs of replacing or repairing those were going up. But for the years leading up to that, we were in the black, so we were enough in the black to cover where we were in the red in the last 2 years. Now we're back in the black, and I'm expecting the same thing as we get towards the end of the program. There's ebbs and flows. So there's carryover.
You get all the carryovers?
Yes. Yeah, we manage that account based upon what the needs are, but over really we're probably into almost a 6 or 7 year trend now.
Okay.
There's a surplus in there, but we're trying to build it up because we're expecting now that we replace these, that we're going to need it on the back end of the program.
Okay.
Okay, so what you see here, this is really what I would use as the one running the audit. This is the detail I would use. This report right here is the exact same summary of the report you just saw, but this is what I would send to leadership. And what this tells me is on this high school, there were 1,900 devices inventory, this many verified, this many misplaced. Misplaced means they're there. They just weren't in the room that they were, your inventory said. It says I'm missing 17 items, 0.9%. Every campus, every department would get that same report. One, it helps the departments know where they stand. Two, it's a great visual tool for your leadership as you go through and do this.
And campuses do not like having anything missing, because these at some point go back up to the assistant chiefs of school, superintendent. We talked about in our leadership team, and we do like a monthly kudos for those that are doing a great job. They really try to own it, which is good.
Okay, so this to me was a feature that I really wanted to emphasize of a partnership that we have with Hayes, because it's really paid dividends for us. Obviously, like any other product, you get a core product, and then you can do what that core product can do. What Hayes has is Hayes has a custom development team. I can request any enhancement that I want, and then they'll put it on their backlog. The backlog is hundreds of requests because you've got thousands of schools putting these things in. Okay, so if I'm okay waiting till that comes to the top, I wait till it's there. If it's something that I really need, that I need now, then I have the opportunity to contact Hayes, get a quote, and then we can choose to pay for that. We can choose to pay for a feature with multiple school districts, sharing the cost and so forth. These are just a few of the things that we decided we needed when we did it. Most of them would be audit related. So you go through here, a quick collect to transfer. This was really about our seniors, because what used to happen is we used to have to, when we would collect a device from a student, it would automatically collect it back to where it was issued from. That's the only choice you had. At the end of the day, then we had to go put all those, rescan all of them, put them on a transfer, and then get ready to send them back to the warehouse. This was a feature, so when you scan that, you have the option to say, do you want to scan it to a room or to a transfer? So if I say transfer, but as I'm doing that piece of work there, by the end of the day, I just ship the transfer. It just saved me a whole bunch of time and work. The funding source fields, this was critical for us, because what we did in the core product, the account code, if you have your POs, the account code, what it was bought from, is automatically listed there. And if you can define things well enough up front, you can go in and identify what account codes go with what. But if you're like us, a lot of that data we didn't get right to begin with. So we worked with Hayes, and we went in, and so now, if it was bought with bond funds, it says bond. If it's Title I, it will say Title I and tell me the school. If it's cake, it will be cake. It doesn't matter what it is. So I can run a report anywhere in my product. And what we're doing right now with our campuses is we're saying, okay, this is all your technology, but this is what you purchased. So when we refresh, we're not touching these items. And most campuses don't know that. So a lot of these functions in here are great, but the biggest part of it is this right here. Okay, I paid for it, and I will say the first one we paid for, I tried to get them to name it after us. They wouldn't do that. But it becomes part of the core product. So you don't become a one-off. It's not like now all of a sudden you paid for it. Now when they do the next enhancement, what you paid for breaks. Because everybody's going to get that in the next release. So what you do becomes part of the core product, and that's been a big plus for us.
So how do they license it?
How do they license it?
Yes. What's the price?
Oh, well, I tell you, the prices I've seen to me were reasonable. In fact,
If I give you some 1,000 students, I got 1,300 students. What's
no, what I'm saying is like that, the
You're talking
funding
about
source
annual
field right
or
there.
the custom development.
either one?
Well, I think that funding source field option right there, if I'm not mistaken, was like $1,100 to do that. The audit ones we did was a bigger, much bigger product and about 4 different enhancements. So.
You can have.
Yeah, Adam,
Hayes is here, so if you want to touch on.
That's right. I'll give a quick answer from back here. Hi, I'm Matt. We license by district size. So the larger the district, the more they pay, and it's essentially a site license per campus. So if anybody wants kind of more specific information, let me know. Yeah, the smaller you are, the less it costs, or vice versa. And then there's work that we do around data conversion, student information system integration. We generally will just kind of look at the project. For example, with Skyward, we've done it 100 times, and so that's X number of dollars. If it's Power School, we know how to do that, and so it's similar. So we just kind of custom build for each, but we only work with school districts, so we price it really based on what fits best with the K-12 model.
Yeah, and no matter how many sites you have, it'll be unlimited assets. So if you want to use it for just one department or multiple departments, like finance assets, band equipment, list keeps going, an unlimited number of users.
Okay.
Thanks, man.
So when you go in and you begin to look at this, budget planning to me was the biggest, probably the biggest plus we got out of this as we started with our last bond run, which we just passed another bond last year. And I will guarantee you, if we didn't have TipWeb, we would, or a management tool for us is TipWeb. We actually could not have even remotely gotten close to what those numbers needed to be, but we could actually produce exactly what we were using, what we had, what we paid for, where it was at, who bought it, and you can just do that really with the touch of the button. Reporting features in here for doing that were very, very strong. And a lot of that now is also due when we go back to the funding sources in there, and then obviously the assist with the ordering process as we go through it.
Yeah, so these processes were critical to plan, but I really believe when we had our community committees, if we weren't showing solid numbers of accountability, that would have not been good. I don't think we would have had the support. So those questions came up, we showed it's like 100 person community committee. Wow, 1/2 of 1% out of 52, that's pretty good. And it just kind of stopped it. It was really focused attention on, well, how are we using instructional aid? What's going to be the impact? How are we going to measure that? Well, that was a different conversation. So that certainly helped. But I just want to touch on one thing too. When Ken was talking about that was for our 2017 bond, but we're now going on 2 years into that. We're going to start thinking about 2022, 2023. And that there was a bullet on that previous slide on backwards designing some of the account structures. That was one of the things we struggled with this time. In fact, why we did the enhancement is we need to be able to break this down really by everything. And if you don't have it in your inventory system, you're going back and you're hunting down POs. You're looking at what was on what PO, and if somebody, I mean, any question's fair game when you get into these community, support conversations. What did you spend on cases? Well, we better have that broken down separately too. So we really spent some time before we cut another PO in this 2017 bond saying almost any combination of questions that could be asked. Do we have a chart of accounts set up that can support that? And now, on the receiving side, that chart of accounts, it's all in A's when we receive the product. So it's going to help us even more with future planning. So other system integrations, so Skyward feed information into TipWeb. So one of the things that we try to do is we try to get our information to where the users are. So for example, you might have an office clerk on a campus managing or collecting fees. Well, they're really not in TipWeb, they're in Skyward. They're in the fee management side. But our techs are in TipWeb. So we're trying to get the fee information out of Skyward, fee management, into TipWeb. And I'll show you an example on the TipWeb information into Skyward. One of the things we were challenged with are our teachers saying, well, the kids don't have a device. Or they told me it's broke. So we tried to create some visibility for teachers so they know what's the status of it, the kids have it. I mentioned before we developed an application called COMS. We call it Campus Operation Management System. I'll show you what that is in a second. And we also set up no-show reporting. So for example, a no-show would be if a kid was enrolled in the district last year, school starts and they never show back up, the campuses automatically get this no-show report, and they basically get a series of letters that go home saying, hey, you have our asset, we need it back. Here's notice 2, here's notice 3, and then they get one from our school attorney. So there's kind of a cadence there where they send that home, and that's all automated through Skyward. It's getting that information from TipWeb. So for example, this is really hard to see, I apologize for that, but this is basically using Skyward's online forms. This gives a campus, a teacher, so when teachers in educator access, they would have a link in there, and they could actually pull up this form and they would see the device, last time it logged in, last user, are there any unpaid fees, is it in repair, like what's its status? So that gives the teachers more visibility, and then this would be the contact log. So here to the campus, reach out, they would put their notes in here, and then the method would be phone call or whatever, email, contact second time, contact third time, and they basically say send letter, yes. What it does is it does a mail merge basically out of that information, out of these fields, it populates the letter. All they gotta do is hit print and it gets sent out to the family. So that's been a good data integration as well. This is a dashboard of comms. So what happens, when this started off as an iPad issue of how do we track all these fees, we don't like looking at these spreadsheets, just want one place to see that. Well, we started developing this with a couple high school campuses, and it was, well, we have an iPad issue, we might have a Class B issue, could be detention, could be an office referral, could be tardy, library, instructional materials. We started building out all these different issue types. So we basically are dumping TipWeb information. And in this particular view, this is a campus, and there's a tool in here where an administrator can actually set their ranges. So it might be, I have kids that are in A through H, and another administrator has whatever, L through Z, whatever, and they would only see kids with their issues. So when they call a kid down, they're gonna see every single issue that we have pulling out of these different issue types. So if it's a tardy, if it's they didn't come to detention, they didn't pay their fees, all of that. So this
Is that within WebDev, or did y'all build another?
We built it. We built this ourselves.
So y'all got a database where you can
Yes.
pulling all this stuff in and then doing.
And we have a web front end on it and set up the security and permissions on it. And we actually use this now too for campuses. at the beginning of the year, you know how you have people assigned to different roles at a campus? Like who's your person gonna oversee GT? Who's your person gonna oversee that? And obviously we're a large district and some of these things are hard to manage. So if the campuses log in, they pick, here's the person for this duty, here's the person for this duty, and they have like first week of school to get it done, and all of a sudden we have one big district list, all in the database, we can sign permissions out through it. It's kind of cool. So lessons learned. I think, am I taking this one? I think I am. So consider one thing I felt like looking back, Ken mentioned we were on Magic. We probably could have moved faster and had better records if we would have actually paid services to have somebody like Hayes or somebody else come in and actually get that first round of audit done, get the inventory done. We were so busy with other projects that it kept getting kicked down the road. And I think the sooner we would have did it, the better position we would have been in. Good systems help with precedence and fidelity. I mean, I think the numbers speak for that. I think when we first started this, or when I started looking at it, I think we had like 10,000 issues occurred. You know, when you look at that logic table, when I started digging in and actually started running reports, I'm like, holy smokes, we gotta get this turned around. Well, within about 3-4 months, we had it down to under 0.5%. So, thanks. Audits create a culture of accountability. Use data to measure outcomes and integrate systems when you can. So what's next for us? We're going to try to continue to improve our processes. There's certainly room to improve. One thing we're going to be moving away from is that MDM check-in, because if a device is left at home, it's still checking, and it's on, it's still checking into the MDM. So the data point we're going to start pulling off of is actually our wireless controllers. So that's going to populate the database, and then we'll know that it's actually last time on campus. Okay, so we're just writing that right now, and then we're moving into, I feel like the inventory process and accountability, we have that part down. Now we're really getting into looking at analytics on how are the devices being used. So with this rollout, we're doing 802.x authentication, and we're doing an always-on VPN. So it's basically tunneling back, giving us the identity of the iPad, and we're classifying traffic that we're dashboarding then in Splunk. So I'm pretty excited about that project. I feel like this is going to be fun. Stressful, because I'm not sure if the data is going to be as good as we want it to be, but it's going to allow us to set some goals and benchmarks around it.
So how big a development team do you have?
We have, I think, we have different people with some development background that play different roles. We probably have 3 people that are doing some development. And we really don't outsource much. We've been fortunate to hire just some rock stars. Our problem.
You got 100, so I have 3 that know how to code.
But our problem is we can't keep them.
Yeah.
So when you look at especially the DFW market, I think we've had on our information services team in the last 18 months, we've had 11 people turnover. So, but we're kind of to a point, I keep telling our director in that area, I'd rather have a rock star for a short period of time versus somebody mediocre for a long time. So I feel like we're able to do some pretty amazing things because they're such a talented crew. Okay.
It's worth noting what these guys are doing in terms of data interoperability is it's a lot, and it's more than most districts across the state. It's really cool. It gives a lot of great visibility to data from a bunch of different places. Vast majority of people that are managing inventory using our system still have some really cool efficiencies and are checking things out to kids and all that happening without using developers. Their developers are just adding that extra layer so that those dashboards are making their way to the various different folks.
Yeah, and kind of build off of that, TipWeb is a data source for all the development we're doing. TipWeb is, Skyward is, our access control points are. All these are data sources that you can pull from to do many of the things that really make managing a large one-to-one, really much more easy to manage. But to that point, yes, we have done almost no custom work internally to TipWeb. It's been a solid product for us to begin with, but it is a data source for all the things we're doing.
You're driving some other things, the young things, the construction side,
Yes, and that's what I'm saying. That's where we're really heading next. So we're looking at I said, classifying, we're really trying to classify it by traffic, because almost in any case, if it's an app or if it's a website, almost everything makes a call to the web. So what we're trying to do is classify that data then into educational use versus non-educational. And we're ingesting basically all of our ICE information, all of our filtering information, and some of our wireless controller information into Splunk. So essentially then what we're doing is dashboarding out the classification of that by, let's say, sites that are whitelisted. Well, those are educational. We have 60 plus apps that are integrated through a single sign-on, so we already know the URL.
What are you using for your building?
Content Keeper.
You know, and just kind of add on to that, a big part of this thing has been questions from the board and questions from the community. And a couple of those have been because you'll hear people out there saying, well, a bunch of students, they don't even take their iPads to school. And a bunch of people, all the kids do is play games on them and so forth. And so the board says, okay, we're hearing this, can you show this? Well, this integration is going to be able to validate that one way or the other. And it becomes critical because when your board gets into these things and starts asking these questions, you can't just say, well, sorry. You have to be able to reduce it. So, you know, it's not like we just sat back and said, okay, what can we integrate? The integrations are in direct response to the things that we have to be able to answer, and so that's kind of where we're going with that. We'd be glad to stay and answer any questions that anybody has. We got open doors so the next presenters can come in. But if you have anything, please feel free to ask.
What do you use for your